If Texas does do something like this, other states will follow.
Everything's bigger in Texas, and we got some big news this week in terms of legislation which proposes a gold-backed electronic currency in Texas. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by our good friend Pat Holland from the Missouri Freedom Initiative. He knows a lot about this type of proposal, type of legislation, and he's agreed to join us today to talk about what he thinks he sees in this Texas proposal. Pat, thanks for joining us again here in Ron's Basement.
Hey, thank you for having me back, Ron. And an interesting topic, very interesting topic. I can't wait.
Yeah, I was fascinated. I'll tell you what I see or what I heard in this that I was fascinated with. It seems the comptroller of Texas will administer this, that this digital currency will be 100% backed by physical gold, and that it will be held at the Texas State Depository, and that it will be 100% redeemable at any time, basically, for physical gold. To me, it's very exciting. And I want to throw in as well, because I'm a big believer in if you don't hold it, you don't own it. I get that. But that this may help facilitate the use of gold in day-to-day transactions. And that if nothing else, right, this isn't prohibiting any of us from holding physical silver, physical gold. This can only be good for gold. The floor is yours, Pat.
Okay. First of all, it's an interesting concept, and it's not something I'm necessarily for, but it's not something I'm necessarily against, because there's problems that haven't been worked out yet. How do you use that money outside the state of Texas? If the other states don't recognize it, by the way, Texas is basically setting up a system that other states can actually go on to. I mean, obviously, but not at first. Okay, let me start with the basics here. In 2015, Texas passed a law to have a depository meant for storing gold and silver and possibly even palladium and platinum. I'm not sure about the palladium and platinum, but gold and silver is definitely there. Okay. And now fast forward to 2018, because they pass it in 2015 and they don't do anything with it. Nothing happens. And then in 2018, there's a PR announcement from, the Texas government. We're starting to fill our depository. From our state reserves, we are now converting into gold and silver. That was very exciting news when it happened. And in fact, that news, when it came out, really inspired me to, help with other states get this sort of thing done. Unfortunately, during the time, I was concentrating on the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and I really couldn't deviate from that because that took a lot of my time and effort. And we have that in Missouri now in a way that no other state has. We have the best law. Okay, so they start filling the depository. There was only one reason to do that. There's only one reason to have a depository, folks, and that is literally to back currency with. That's it. And so, it might be sold as having a hedge, basically for the pension fund, but that's how you start. Because that's what you can do with it when you're starting. You start small. You don't, get $1 trillion worth of gold and silver overnight, or even $1 billion. You start small because you don't want to upset the market, right? Okay, so fast forward now to 2023. They have a lot of gold and silver in their depository. They've been, faithfully stacking, doing, the dollar cost averaging like Ron and I do. Literally in their depository. And now they got enough to actually look at something like this. Will this get done this year? I don't think so. Now, that's my opinion. I could be totally wrong. And I'm not in touch with any legislative folks in Texas right now, because I got my own stuff to deal with. But right now, my gut tells me it won't get through this year. But the idea that it's being floated out there is probably scaring the crap out of people in the federal government. And that's a good thing. Government should be scared of the states. It was designed to be that way, by the way. So they should be fearful of the states and what the states have the power to do. Remember now, the Constitution is not your rights. Those are limitations on the federal government, what they have to do and what they can't do. and everything else is on 10th Amendment, basically states' rights. Okay. So let's talk about digitizing, basically gold and silver. That in itself is an excellent idea. Okay, let's start with that, because bullion banks do this. Bullion banks will give you an ATM card, and then your gold and silver that's stored in their vault becomes literally a medium of exchange right through a debit card. That's essentially what they're doing in Texas. They're becoming the world's biggest bullion bank. And so for that reason, it's a good idea. Doing it as a crypto-based, solution. I'm sorry, let me take this. It's a blockchain-based solution. It would not be a cryptocurrency. If they had a digital representation of gold and silver, it would still be money. So we have to define our terms, I think, when we talk about what Texas is doing. It would not be a crypto. It would actually be some kind of token or representation of the actual gold and silver. So currency, no. Money, yes. That's where it gets confusing and muddy. So if Texas does do something like this, other states will follow, guaranteed, if they can prove that it works. But how can I spend that up in Missouri? Well, it would have to be like a bullion bank at that point, and no longer like a depository, because there's no bank to transfer that to in Missouri if there's an exchange between Texas and Missouri. So at any rate, so you see my point. Other people would have to have an account with that depository or with the bullion bank, as it were, that Texas seems to want to be. So if what they're proposing is, hey, listen, we have enough gold and silver now to have our own bank, be your own central bank, right? Mm-hmm. Texas is doing it. They're putting it into practice. If they've got enough to do it, great. But it seems to me they'd be difficult to operate with the mechanisms they're setting up with that bill outside the state of Texas.
Interesting. And I want to get your opinion on this. It's my impression that the state of Texas, let's say over the last 10 years, has done really well. That there's some cities there that are growing, that they're more of an innovative state. I'm having a hard time putting this into words, but they're emerging on a national basis as a state that can be looked at like a leader. Especially when it comes to
maybe even its own country.
That thought crossed my. It's funny you say that, because I thought that last night. I thought I could see Texas, but anyway, we'll leave that discussion for a different video. That they're just a leader and that they do things right. There's not a lot of BS. Any thoughts on that, Pat?
Yes, there are thoughts on that, because I will tell you that Texas does. Okay, we're going to deviate just a tad from gold and silver, but it's important distinction here. Missouri has what we call the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and it's enforceable by fines. If law enforcement in Missouri, by the way, what that means for your listeners who don't know what the Second Amendment Preservation Act is, it basically what you're doing is you're setting up a law in your state that your law enforcement in your state and any subdivision of the government cannot enforce federal gun law. So Missouri no longer enforces federal gun laws, and that means federal charge codes as well. And that gets into a bigger conversation we cannot do on a short video. Mm-hmm. But what that essentially means is, if they do enforce a federal gun law in the state of Missouri, a sheriff or a police, officer, or even a court in Missouri enforce a federal gun law, they will be fined $50,000 per incident. And wow. and there's in our law, we have a way to fast track that through the courts. They're not going to wait 10 years to get that money. Actually, it'd be surprising to me if they had to wait 4 months to get that money. It's quick.
Okay.
Texas did not do this. Here's the deal. This is okay. And once again, we're slightly deviating from gold and silver, but it includes gold and silver. If you want to secure your state's rights, if you want to follow the Constitution of the United States, we have given up a lot of our state's rights to the federal government, and the federal government is a bully. Here's what you do. Number one, you secure your Second Amendment rights. That's what you do in your states. Number two, you secure the money. That's what we're doing right now with gold and silver. And then third, you secure your food. And that's what I'm on right now. We took care of guns. We got that done in 2021. In 2023, we're going after the money. That's our gold and silver bill. And then when we get that through, then we'll go through something called the Food Freedom Act. And that's separate from gold and silver, but a very, very important thing to do. And that's getting the FDA out of your state for regulation of food. And so that, by the way, that is, I don't want to even talk about that because that's a big subject on its own, but it's extremely important. So Texas never did SEPA. They never did it in a proper way. They do have a version of SEPA, but there's no enforcement mechanism. So they have a problem. The ATF is still down there. Now, when you're doing a bullion depository, now we're switching back to gold and silver. When you do a bullion depository, what you're saying is we're preparing to leave the dollar. That's what you're announcing to the world. There's no other reason to have a depository. Like I said, if there's a certain circumstance or instance where you anticipate having enormous industry in your state needing precious metals to create products and make things, I understand that too, but that's just not the case. Gold is just not used very much, and in very small quantities too, by the way. Where silver, I would say about 85% of all the silver that's mined in this world goes into industry. It doesn't go into bars and coins. It goes into making things. The very camera that I'm looking into right now has silver in it. The monitor in front of me has silver in it. Basically my headphones have silver in it. The microphone is silver in it. Silver's in everything, and it's critical because it is the most effective metal we have on the planet to transfer electricity. So that's why we have to have a lot of silver mined every year. And the recycling of silver is dubious at best. You can take it out of electronics, but you can't take it out of water filtration. It's very difficult anyway. You can't take it out of certain things like glass. Your windshield of your car, it's very difficult to melt that down and get the silver. Difficult and costly are when I say difficult, I mean very costly. Anything's possible, folks, but it depends on how much money you're willing to spend. Silver has to go up a lot more before we see big silver recycling programs. So that's what I'm trying to say here, I think. Okay. And by the way, I remember when in 2011, silver had a bit of a moonshot. Actually, it didn't even get out of the troposphere, but it was trying to go for the moon. And it went up to $48. The recycling programs during that climb were amazing. You were getting, the recycling centers were actually giving you forms to write off what you donated to the agency, that was recycling on your taxes. I mean, That's how badly they wanted the silver from you, all the products that contain silver. So it was worth it then. There's been a lot of dollars printed since 2011, gang. I suspect it's going to take 2 to 3 times as much money to recycle silver as it did in 2011. Yeah. And the Chinese are not working for cheap anymore. Chinese have a very robust economy. As an example, in 2000, when we gave them most favored nation trading status. Now, keep in mind, Nixon put China in the WTO in 1971. Clinton put them into most favored nation trading status in 2000, which is a very coveted place to be in the World Trade Organization. When we did that, the average Chinese was making the equivalent to 25 cents an hour. Now, according to the data that I'm seeing right now, the average Chinese is making $9.75 an hour, and that's in only 23 years.
Wow.
So things have changed in China. Is it cheap for us to recycle metals through China anymore?
No.
Nope.
No. Actually, I heard Keith Neumeyer, he's the CEO of First Majestic Silver.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with Keith.
Yeah, Keith mentioned, I think it was like in the last 3 years that there's like half as much silver now being recycled as there was 3 years ago. That it's just not cost effective. And that's what he said. It's like, Correct. It doesn't make sense. So sure, if silver goes to $60, $70 an ounce, we'll see an uptick in silver recycling. But will that be enough? Because I'm telling you, everybody I talk to out there on the street, boots on the ground, dealers, bullion dealers, they're saying silver right now is becoming extremely difficult to find.
That's correct. And in fact, and Keith is a great guy, by the way. I like Keith very much.
Yeah.
But I think Keith is going to have to, like many other people who mine silver, are going to have to start looking at ways of extracting silver from the oceans, because that's where we're going next, folks. Now, the last time I looked at this, and oh my goodness, was it David Morgan, I think. Last time I looked at this, I'm thinking it was 2019. Maybe it was 2018. And back then they were thinking what your Silver Bear's thinking, $85 an ounce in order to make it cost effective to mine in the oceans, because you need different equipment. It's more expensive to mine it that way. But that is a fact. And so, but now we've printed a lot more, money since COVID, right? Or currency. So what is it going to be now? Is it going to be $160 an ounce to make it cost effective to mine in the ocean? We can't do without silver on the planet and maintain, the lifestyles that we have. Silver is absolutely necessary to our civilization. Gold is not. That's the weird part. Go ahead.
Well, it's so interesting too that over the last decade there has been so little investment into silver exploration, new silver mine. The silver miners have most of them pivoted to gold. Fortuna Silver first. Well, Keith tried with First, because so and then so there's not a big pipeline of new projects coming on. And then on top of that, the fact is that 70 to 75% of the silver that is produced every year is a byproduct from copper mining, from lead mining, from zinc mining. It's an afterthought. And so if the demand, if we get into a real shortage situation, it's not like there's going to be a switch that can be turned on to double the amount of silver. There's not a switch to be turned on to increase silver production by 15 or 20% even.
That's correct. And I'll say it again. And, at the risk of, being, extremely repetitive, which I don't like to do, but the fact is silver is so incredibly suppressed by the United States government, by the U.S. Treasury. Doesn't matter if it's Trump, if it's Obama, if it's Clinton, or if it's Bush. They all do it, gang. Because silver must be suppressed if you want the dollar to be the shiniest turd in the box. That's a fact. And then they work with banks to do it, member banks, by the way, member banks. It's a very important, aspect to remember here. Other banks outside of the member bank, inner circle have been caught doing it too, but they worked with inner banks to do it, or the member banks. So the fact is, silver is much more heavily suppressed than gold. Gold is suppressed as well. Don't get me wrong. It's being suppressed by a lot. But and by the way, if you want numbers, just go back and see what gold was worth in 1913 and what silver was worth in 1913. And then look at how much inflation we have had since then. Because remember now, the dollar was worth $1, 100 pennies. Basically in 1913. What is it worth now? 90, or it's taken away 97 cents. It's worth 3 cents now. The dollar's worth 3 cents by the 1913 standard. So you have to take that into account when you see how much gold and silver's worth. Silver has been horribly suppressed, horribly. It's the redheaded stepchild syndrome. It's literally being held down so hard, with so much energy pushing it down with that futures market, gang, that when that energy is released, there is a very good possibility of one heck of a moonshot for silver. Just because of the energy being pressed upon it right now. It doesn't mean it will actually go to fair value, when it goes to the moon. It'll probably be well above fair value. But at the same time, it will spring upwards, because that spring has been compressed for a long time.
First Mining Gold is a development company advancing two of the largest gold projects in Canada. Springpole in Ontario and Duparquet, located in Quebec, each already has 5 million ounces of gold reserves, but exploration initiatives are underway at both projects to find even more gold. First Mining is well-financed, has zero debt, and owns an interest in 4 additional Canadian gold development projects.
They stripped silver and gold from backing the US money system, currency, the dollar, whatever. They did that because silver and gold were becoming too valuable.
Well, yeah, that's correct, because they were overprinting the dollar.
Yeah, right. I mean, a very simplistic way to say it. Thank you, Pat. We covered everything. Gold-backed digital currency in Texas.
Yep.
The ocean, and we came back to our favorite subject, our good friend. I know you and I both love silver. On behalf of my viewers, thank you. I want to mention, if you want to learn more about Pat, you can check out the Missouri Freedom Initiative.
That's right.
Pat is working diligently here in Missouri to further along some really cool silver gold legislation in the state of Missouri, SB 100. Pat, did I miss anything? Anything you want to add?
MoFree.org, get on if you're in Missouri and you want to participate in this grand experiment of actually getting freedom back for Missourians, that's our core goal. Join us, get on the email list, and then basically you get information direct from me on how you can participate if you choose to do so. There's no membership fees. There's no money in it at all. It's just your time, emailing, calling and visiting Jefferson City when appropriate. We do have another meeting coming up next week. That'll be April 19th. We're actually another knock and shock situation up in Jeff City to help push gold and silver SB 100 across the finish line.
And I will put a link to the Missouri Freedom Initiative website in the description below. Pat, thank you. And I will look forward to talking to you again sometime here in the near future.
Thank you, Ron. God bless you. And God bless all your viewers.
Thanks, Pat.